Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is finally here. The Pickems have released for the opening stage of the Perfect World Shanghai Major, and I am super excited as ever with the Pickems rolling around. I'll be making consistent content on this one as the major unfolds, and I was also fortunate enough to be at the RMRs themselves. I was at the Americas RMRs and then both of the EU RMRs to see how these games and teams kind of unraveled or succeeded to get to this point. I got a chance to watch it all unfold live in person. So obviously tons of research went into the RMRs in the first place, and I got a chance to watch the teams kind of like reap the rewards of their efforts and their labors. So very excited for this one, and we're just going to be cracking straight into it. So we do have the opening fixtures. This is going to bode into our decision-making process for the 0-3 and 3-0s. I do need to mention as well, just to be completely clear on this, that it's not like the old system with the Pickems where you could play it safe and, you know, you could have your 3-0 gamble picks and then go into your advancing teams, and if you put an advancing team in that ended up 3-0ing, you would still get the point. That's no longer the case. You actually need to pick the teams you think will 3-0 and the teams you think will advance 3-1 or 3-2. So do keep that in mind. So with that being said, I'm going to start with the 0-3 picks, but first I'm going to read out the matchups. So Furia take on Gamer Legion, VP versus MIBR, Liquid against Cloud9, Complexity take on FlyQuest, Big versus Passion UA, Fnatic and Wildcard, the Mongols against Rare Atom, and then finally Pain and Imperial will do a battle in the last game of the day. There is a lot of close games there and some games that are very tough to call between, and it does kind of affect some of my 3-0-0-3 picks and my ideas on where I think these teams are going to be coming down. I think a lot of people, I'll start with the 0-3, a lot of people are going to be sucked into this idea of going for Wildcard, and it's because they are a lesser known entity, you know, like it's not a team that's super famous. You hear about some of their players, like obviously they have Stanislaw, who's been around forever, previously of Optic, going way back when. Sonic is another player that's been around for a long time, but then you have like JBA and Susp, and people won't really know who these guys are. But I'm not going to be jumping into that trap myself, because at the Americas RMRs, these guys got super legit wins. They actually went through flawlessly. They beat Liquid 16-12. They beat Pain 13-10. And they beat 9Z 2-0. They did not drop a map to make it through to this point. And so even if we like say, oh, it was a fluke, it was a one-off, it was luck, I still think they're good to pick up a map here. And I would be surprised if they go 0-3. It's a possibility, but I feel very uncomfortable with going them on 0-3. Additionally, they're against Fnatic in their first game, and I'm not so sure that that is as one-sided as a lot of people are kind of writing it off as. So I'm not going to be going for Wildcard here. I actually think Wildcard have a win or two in them. Additionally, I've heard some people talk about Gamer Legion as a 0-3 team. I think that is madness. Ash deserves respect. This team deserves respect. You got Slend in there. Flamus is really solid. ZTR. It's just a very good team. Much better than a lot of people are giving it credit for. And I don't think it's a formality of a game between Fury and Gamer Legion. I think Gamer Legion could even pull off an upset there. Again, keep in mind, these are best of one opening matchups. Furia in the Americas RMRs lost against Legacy 1917 in their first game of the Americas RMRs. They are a team that is susceptible to slow starts. If they start slow against Gamer Legion, they can absolutely get punished as a result. So I think there's a lot of potential banana peels in this opening best of one format. Liquid Cloud9 is another very interesting game. VP MIBR, very interesting game. And then Big and Passion, a bit of a grudge match, a bit of a revenge match, because remember, both teams in the RMR for the EU were 2-0, and Big beat Passion in that to go 3-0 through into this next stage. Passion then went on to play against Heroic and then Astralis, where they finally got the job done. But keep in mind, Passion also beat VP 16-14 on their opening matchup, and they beat Simple. They beat Spirit 13-11 as well in two best of one crazy results that very few people saw happening. So I think people putting Passion in the 0-3 bracket also are playing a very dangerous game. I think Passion have a best of one in them for sure at some point. Therefore, I am going to be going for Rare Atom and Imperial. Now, Imperial have had some pretty good runs over the years in majors. I just don't see it being a case here. I've actually been pretty underwhelmed with them. At the Americas RMRs, they got 3 wins, but their wins were against Case, Crew, and Red Canids. None of those teams are particularly exciting or high level. They lost to MIBR 13-9. They lost to Pain 13-5. So to put it in perspective, they're playing Pain in their first match, and they got hammered by them the last time they played each other, which was just a couple weeks ago. So I kind of see history repeating itself there. I think Imperial are going to struggle to pick up maps, and Rare Atom are going up against the Mongols in their first game. I just don't see them getting much success. They've been losing to teams like Spirit Academy as of late. They've just been having a struggle. So I personally think these are the 2 teams I'm looking at as my 0-3 teams. And I feel not necessarily confident on this, because when it comes to best of ones, anything's possible. But I certainly don't want to be looking at Wildcard, Passion, or GL for a potential 0-3 team. Maybe we get some madness and like Fnatic go 0-3, or maybe Cloud9 go 0-3, but I really doubt it. So for our 3-0 picks, the first one, I'm going to go for the Mongols, kind of on the opposite side of the same foot that we were just discussing there with Rare Atom. They play Rare Atom in their first game. I think that's a win for the Mongols, and at that point, I think they're in a good spot to maybe even just go through and blitz and make a pretty convincing run of it. So I'm going to have the Mongols as one of my 3-0 teams. And this next one's a little bit tough because I want to go for Liquid as a 3-0 pick. I want to have full faith that they're going to beat Cloud9 and they're going to just go for this clean run. But I always feel that Liquid have a loss in them somewhere along the lines. And so I'm nervous about going for Liquid as a 3-0 pick, but I think I will. I'm going to go for Liquid, and if this backfires and they end up going 3-1, I'm going to be kicking myself, because originally what I was going to do, and just as a spoiler warning, I'm going to put VP through, I was thinking of going VP 3-0 and Liquid as a 3-1 team instead. The reason for that is that VP for me looked very mediocre in the RMRs. They got one of the easiest runs, and I mean no disrespect here, but it's just when you look at what Passion UA's done and Heroic's done and even Big have done, and then you look at VP's run, they're not the same. So VP beat TSM 13-10, 9 Pandas 13-10, and Sashi 2-1. And both of those best of ones were on Ancient, where Electronic was kind of popping off, going crazy nuclear. Norbert had a couple of decent maps alongside Jame, and Flit and Fame were just basically absent. They didn't really get into their second or third gear. And that's just VP in a nutshell, you know, like for quite some time now, they've been plodding along and they've been managing to grind out victories, which I suppose is the marking of the good teams, right? Like you're not playing at your top level and you're still getting wins. And there is definitely an element of respect that should be finding itself towards them, the fact they can do that and grind out these victories. In some cases, they have no right winning. They could have easily lost to TSM. They could have easily lost to 9 Pandas. Even that Sashi game they could have lost realistically. But I feel like they haven't got out of first gear yet, and they are a team that has tons of experience, a team that has tons of mechanical skill and really solid players on the roster, where if it does start to click, yeah, VP could just take over and actually be like a legit contender to go into the semi-finals. That's the kind of team they are. They have that capability. But then on the other side, they're a team that could just crash out of this stage and not make it to the elimination. That's kind of why I was thinking of putting them as a 3-0, bit of a gamble pick, and then Liquid is a 3-1 team, because I think they may drop a map. But I'll go with this. I'll say Liquid and Mongols to make it 3-0, and VP is a 3-1 team. Let's drop down to some of those 3-2 teams. So I think the first 3-2 team I'm going to go for here is actually Furia. I do think Furia is going to make it through. I think similar to VP, they have so much experience in this team. Really, it's just Skulls, and even Skulls has plenty of experience at this point. We have obviously Fallen, Cello, K-Serato, and Yuri. K-Srot and Yuri, even though they've not been playing at their peak level now for a while, are still one of the best duos on the planet and are a win condition and an X factor for Furia that can just carry them across, kicking and screaming into a 3-2 sort of score and make the elimination stage. I think they will make the elimination stage. It's not going to be pretty, it's not going to be convincing, it's not going to be easy, but I think they will. And so I'm going to back them. Their run in the RMRs as well was kind of thrown. I mentioned this before, but it was just thrown into the wind because they lost their first best of one and they had a slow start against Legacy. And then because Liquid also lost one of their opening games, they played Liquid in a 1-1 matchup, which they lost. And they went down into the awkward side of the bracket. So the loss to Liquid, fair enough. Can't really be too ashamed or embarrassed about that one. It's mainly the loss to Legacy in the first best of one. That's why I think Gamer Legion do have an outside shot of actually, lightning striking twice, so to speak. But I think Furia still make it. I'm also going to have Pain. I actually think the Brazilian's going to do pretty well here in the opening stage, as is quite often the case. It was the same back at Copenhagen. I think Pain are too good not to make it through. They impressed me at the RMR for the Americas. It was actually a much more collective effort. If you cast your mind back to Copenhagen, it was basically the Big Azera show where he was suddenly in the shop window and everyone was like, he's got to go to Fury or he's got to go to this team, or hell, just take him to Europe and have him play for like Mouse or somebody else. And he stayed. He is Mr. Pain, basically. He is a ride or die type guy, which I respect. But in the RMRs here, it was a real collective effort. He's actually bottom in terms of stats in a lot of their maps. He wasn't dropping the crazy performances. He had NQZ on the AWP doing great work. Lux was playing well. Additionally, Coez, who's typically more of a supportive element, and Snow also have some really good games. This Pain roster is looking like it's hitting a really nice vein of form at the perfect time. And I think they're going to keep it going through into the opening stage, and they're going to just dial away into the elimination stage. We'll go back up for a 3-1 team here. I'll probably say Complexity. I think should be good to get 3 wins here. I could see them dropping a map. I could even see them lose to FlyQuest in the first game if they start slow. I've been more and more impressed with how Grim and Holzuk have been playing as of late, and even Floppy to a degree. For the longest time, it was basically the Elise show, and I don't think it is as much anymore, although sometimes it still does go into that kind of way. But I think Complexity, they got the experience again, they got the players, they got the stars. They should be able to shine bright here, and they should be able to deliver. I feel pretty confident about Complexity making it through. This is where it starts to get quite a bit more difficult, though, I will say, because there are a number of teams. I wouldn't even be against the idea of putting Gamer Legion to make it through. I think that they have an outside shot. They're a bit of a dark horse for me. But realistically, I'm looking at Big, Fnatic, Cloud9, and MIBR. And I've only got 2 spots. So those are the teams that are in my mind right now. The problem is, though, as much as I want to believe in Cloud9, as much as I have this kind of love for this team, I love watching Heavy God play. I've loved watching him play for years now, and it was great to see at the RMR, he really did pretty much just solidify himself as a legit powerhouse player. I don't think it's their time just yet, though. I would have been more inclined to believe in Cloud9 if they weren't against Liquid in their first game. It's actually one of those situations where their opening fixture puts me off just a little bit in backing them, because I think they'll be down in that 0-1 bracket where they could be against some like pretty nasty teams. And when you look at their trajectory to getting to the opening stage, take nothing away from them, but they beat Namiga, Sangal, and Sinners. And they lost a map to Sinners. They lost to FaZe twice, which, fair enough, it's FaZe. That's not an embarrassing loss at all. But Sangal looked pitiful at the RMRs. Alongside Eternal Fire, probably the biggest disappointment of the entire thing, because online they were looking like kings, and then at the RMRs they just looked like they didn't even show up to the server. Like, it was really rough to watch. Heavy God was great, Axel was great, Icy was great, but I think this might be a bridge too far for them, so I'm inclined not to go for them as well. Fnatic feels like it's blame or bust, and he was unbelievable for Fnatic in the RMRs. I even made a tweet that kind of popped off, and I wasn't expecting it to, saying, can we drop the narrative of calling him Bait F now? Because in this particular game, he had 12 for 0 in terms of opening duels. Now, if you think back to any of the god tier entry rifles or entry killers over the years, 12-0 would make any of them weep with happiness. He was insane. He had crazy ADR, crazy amounts of kills, heaps of impact, but it feels like it's him that has to go above and beyond right now. Mattis is a very good player, but he's not quite at the same level. And when you drop down past that point, he's not at that level anymore. Additionally, body is very up and down. Like, he's very good on Anubis, but then the rest of the map pool he struggles. And Nork is a decent AWPer, but he's not the next level kind of AWPer. You know, if I think of Fnatic going against Cloud9, which is like a classic matchup, you know, going way back when, I would favor Cloud9 to win that game. I would probably favor GL to beat Fnatic right now. I would probably favor FlyQuest to maybe give Fnatic a run for their money. And I could see Wildcard maybe even beating them in that opening best of one. So I don't feel particularly confident about Fnatic either. So I've kind of answered my own question there, that I think it's going to be big, and I think it's going to be MIBR. A lot of Brazilians, I think, are going to make it through to the elimination stage. Big impressed me. That win against Heroic in particular, in their 3-0 trajectory to this point, you could argue they've been wrecked. The fact that they're even in this after going 3-0, I would be inclined to agree with you. But I think Big and MIBR, man, they were looking really good in their respective RMRs. And I think they're going to continue that kind of form coming here into the opening stage of the major. And I think it's going to be good enough to yield an elimination spot. So it pains me not to see Cloud9 here. Love watching these guys play. GL are definitely in the conversation, I think. Passion as well. I honestly can see them picking up some best of ones as they did before. But those are going to be my picks here. And I could get wrecked. I could wish that I'd switched VP and Liquid around, or maybe VP and the Mongols around. But I've got to go with who I think is most likely to 3-0 and the teams that I think are going to drop maps but still make it through. So comment below and let me know what your thoughts are on the Pickems. Am I completely off base? Have I not thought about something here? Give me a shout. What are your picks going to be? And I'll see you in the elimination match, or elimination stage, I should say, section of the major. We only need 5 correct, guys. 5 correct. And we are on the hunt for Diamond. Fingers crossed. Peace.